Seducing a woman was never a game of flowers. It has always been a psychological war where every gesture, every silence, and every look can decide whether you win or lose. If Niccolo Machiavelli were alive today, he would not write letters to princes. He would study the female mind like a strategic land full of secret doors and hidden weaknesses. This dirty experiment shows that real seduction is not about charm, but about the silent power of a man who understands what she tries to hide, even from herself. No one ever knew for sure if Machiavelli really wrote that hidden manuscript. It was found centuries later inside a secret space behind an old bookshelf in Florence. Some say it was just one of many secret psychological experiments he conducted away from public eyes. Others say it was too dangerous to be shared with normal people. But the truth is, the text existed. In it, Machiavelli studied with sharp detail and cold intention what he called the invisible behavior of desire. He explained that women do not make emotional decisions through logic. They decide through a mix of feelings, emotions, and impressions. And if these elements are controlled properly, any man can become someone she cannot ignore. Machiavelli did not talk about romance or sweet charm. He talked about power and influence. How to enter a woman's mind without her noticing and make her believe that every step she takes toward you was her own decision. According to the manuscript, it starts even before the first look. Machiavelli said, "Seduction begins with scarcity, not presence. A man who is always available loses value because he gives his energy without control, without limits, and without purpose. He becomes predictable, and predictable men do not seduce." He wrote, "A rare man is worth more than a perfect man." This meant the first weapon is not charm or talking, but strategic distance. He explained that distance creates curiosity, and curiosity is the first crack in a person's emotional wall. A woman does not get attached to what she already understands. She gets attached to what she still cannot figure out. That is why Machiavelli said, "The biggest mistake men make is trying to be understood too far." In the experiment, Machiavelli tested this with a group of men. He told them to stay one step behind the women they wanted to win. Not far away, not cold, just one step behind. Close enough to be noticed, but rare enough to be wanted. The result was shocking. The women not only started talking about those men more often, but they also began getting closer to them without even realizing they were doing it. It was the beginning of the silent manipulation he wanted to prove. Machiavelli wrote that a woman chases what she feels she might lose, not what she already has. The experiment proved exactly that. Then he went deeper into the second stage, creating emotional contrast. Machiavelli believed a woman only becomes strongly attached to a man when he makes her feel two emotions at the same time: safety and threat. Not physical threat, but psychological threat. The fear of not feeling good enough. The fear of being forgotten. The feeling of standing in front of someone she admires but still cannot control. A man who gives too much safety becomes a friend. A man who gives too much threat becomes an enemy. But a man who mixes both becomes an addiction. In the manuscript, Machiavelli describes how he guided conversations to activate small insecurities in women while also giving immediate comfort. He would make a comment that left the woman slightly confused, and seconds later, he would give a validation that emotionally pulled her back in. It was cruel, but it worked, and he knew it. The third part of the experiment involved controlling the rhythm. Machiavelli said, "A woman falls in love with the gap, not the act. It is not the message that creates attraction, but the silence before it. It is not the compliment that leaves a mark, but the calculated time before giving it." The women in the experiment reported, without realizing it, that they missed something, even when the men had promised nothing. That missing feeling was the emotional opening needed for the next phase: selective mirroring. Selective mirroring meant showing signs of similarity only in moments when the woman was emotionally vulnerable. It was not about agreeing all the time or copying gestures. It was about mirroring only what strengthened the connection. When the woman showed weakness, the man understood her. When she showed strength, the man challenged her. When she talked about dreams, he revealed even bigger ambitions. And when she spoke about fear, he showed courage. In this way, an illusion of perfect match was created, that addictive feeling that he is exactly what is missing in me. The final stage of this first part of the manuscript talked about a detail that was simple but deadly: the look. For Machiavelli, eye contact was not a window to the soul, it was a weapon of war. He trained himself to hold eye contact only until the woman started feeling she needed to look away. And once she looked away, it was already too late, because the brain records looking away as involuntary submission. Machiavelli wrote coldly, "A woman who looks away first will later try to regain control." And it is in that attempt that emotional involvement begins. It was only the beginning of the experiment. The rest of the manuscript went deep into even darker strategies, where seduction and manipulation mixed so subtly that even today many believe it should never have been made public. The manuscript revealed that after mastering the art of curiosity, emotional ups and downs, and eye contact, the experiment reached its most dangerous stage, psychological infiltration. Machiavelli defined it as the ability to enter a woman's thoughts without asking permission in such a smooth way that she would believe she was the first one to imagine you. He said, "A woman only truly gives herself when she feels the idea of you was born inside her, never when she thinks she was pushed into it." Just as a wise leader does not force his authority but makes people want to follow him, the Machiavellian seducer does not force admiration. He plants it. To do this, Machiavelli taught the use of 3 subtle triggers: the rare gesture, the seed phrase, and ghost presence. The rare gesture was a small, unexpected behavior that left a deep emotional mark. It could not be something exaggerated or predictable, but a detail that activated in her mind the feeling of uniqueness. In the experiment, the men trained by Machiavelli did simple things, such as adjusting a strand of the woman's hair behind her ear while saying something completely unexpected, and then never repeating that gesture again. The impact was devastating. Without realizing it, the women started waiting for a repetition that never came. In its absence, the gesture grew inside them. Machiavelli wrote, "The rare gesture creates memory. Memory creates longing, and longing creates desire." The second tool was the seed phrase. Machiavelli believed that certain words, when spoken with perfect timing, grow in a woman's mind as if they were inner voices. They were not obvious compliments, and they were not romantic lines. They were observations that touched her ego in an ambiguous way. Something like, "You have no idea how much people underestimate you," or "It's funny. You look strong, but you carry a lot that nobody notices." When a woman heard this, she tried to prove to herself that he saw her in a way no one else did. In the experiment reports, many women admitted they kept thinking about those phrases for hours, sometimes for days, trying to understand what they truly meant. That was the goal. The seed phrase was not meant to be understood immediately. It was meant to grow on its own in silence. The third technique, which Machiavelli considered the most advanced, was ghost presence. Here, the man needed to learn how to leave emotional traces that remained even when he was not present. Not messages, not insistence, but a mental presence. Machiavelli taught that the trick was to alternate small absences with small emotional deliveries, creating a cycle in which the woman would start wondering on her own where he was, what he was doing, or why he still had not appeared. The secret was to seem busy with something bigger than her, but without ever creating the feeling of disinterest. In the tests, when one of the men disappeared for a few hours after an intense conversation, the woman reacted with a mix of restlessness and expectation. And it was in this emotional gap that true seduction became stronger. Machiavelli wrote something disturbing about this stage. A woman only overthinks a man when she realizes she does not have full control over him. For him, the male mistake was giving control too early. He observed that when a woman felt she could predict all of a man's reactions, she quickly placed him in the neutral category, the ones who create no emotional impact. But when she could not predict him, she began creating theories, scenarios, and possibilities inside her own mind, and the more she imagined, the more emotionally connected she became to his presence. "A woman's imagination is my ally," he wrote. "That is where seduction is completed." The manuscript then continued by describing the fourth stage, the construction of the irresistible identity. Machiavelli claimed that to deeply seduce a woman, it was not enough to have charm, presence, or mystery. It was necessary to create an emotional character that fit her weaknesses. He said, "Every heart has a crack. The one who seduces is the one who knows how to find the crack and shape himself to it." That is why, during the experiment, Machiavelli ordered each man to carefully observe not what the woman said, but what she avoided saying. Silence always revealed more than words. And when a woman, even without meaning to, let something slip, a micro gesture, an unresolved memory, a distant look, or a melancholic sigh, that was where the Machiavellian seducer built his identity. The irresistible identity was not a fake role. It was a real version of the man, but calibrated. He kept his beliefs, but highlighted certain qualities the woman deeply valued and hid traits that could break the charm too early. It was like polishing his own image until it fit her emotional shape. This included the way he spoke, the tone of his voice, his humor, his posture, and even the way he reacted to provocation. In the diaries left by the women involved in the experiment, many said it felt as if he understood them without effort. They never realized that this understanding was calculated, shaped, and refined to meet their unconscious expectations. At the end of this second part, Machiavelli wrote a sentence that summarized the entire logic of manipulative seduction. A woman does not fall in love with the man. She falls in love with the version of herself that awakens when she is in front of him. This sentence guided the rest of the manuscript, which went even deeper into the darker zones of female psychology and into strategies he considered too powerful to be taught to the common man. The third part of the manuscript entered one of the darkest areas of the experiment: emotional manipulation through contrast. Machiavelli believed no woman gives herself to a man who offers only comfort. He said, "The female heart needs peaks and valleys, moments of intensity followed by calm, so that desire can grow in a real way. Attraction," he wrote, "is not born from stability, it is born from oscillation." And it was exactly this oscillation that he began to test in an almost mathematical way during the experiment. For this, he created a method he called the irregular flow of attention. It was not disappearing completely, and it was not being present all the time. It was a precise dance between presence and absence, intensity and calculated indifference. Machiavelli noted that a woman must feel a man has his own world, a world she wants to enter, but one he only allows her to access partially. When a man becomes fully available, he loses emotional weight. When he becomes fully distant, he loses relevance. True seduction exists in the middle, at the point where the woman feels she must make effort to access the best part of him. In the experiment, the men were instructed to create small moments of frustration. Not fights, not disrespect, but subtle discomforts that made the woman realize she did not have full control of the situation. This included taking a few extra minutes to reply, ending a conversation at the peak of her interest, or changing the subject when she expected validation. The goal was not to irritate her, but to activate the part of the mind Machiavelli called the instinct of emotional conquest. Women, according to him, become more involved with what they have not yet mastered and less involved with what is already guaranteed. But Machiavelli's dark genius appeared in the next stage. He rewarded this frustration with controlled doses of deep attention. When the woman started to feel slight unease, the man offered a gesture, a phrase, or a presence that made her feel unique again. This cycle of tension and reward created a silent emotional dependence. In the reports of the women analyzed in the experiment, many said they felt something different when speaking with these men, a mix of anxiety and comfort. That was exactly what Machiavelli wanted, the feeling of emotional addiction. He wrote, "A woman confuses emotional intensity with deep connection." For him, if a man could create emotions strong enough, even conflicting emotions, he would create a psychological anchor that would be almost impossible to break. The human mind, according to him, becomes attached to what makes the heart swing, not to what keeps it stable. That is why warm, weak relationships disappear, while complex relationships become unforgettable. Machiavelli understood that by controlling the emotional climate, the man controls the rhythm of attachment. Next, the manuscript described one of the most controversial techniques of the experiment, the illusion of exclusivity. Here, Machiavelli said, "The woman must believe there is something in her that the man cannot find in anyone else. It does not matter if it is true. What matters is that she feels irreplaceable, but only up to a certain point." He instructed the men to praise specific qualities of the woman while always implying that these qualities could be lost. For example, a man would say, I like how you see things in a way almost nobody notices, but sometimes you try to hide that. In this way, the compliment carried a shadow, and that shadow activated her desire to prove she was truly unique to him. Machiavelli also tested the technique of strategic conflict. It was a form of soft disagreement where the man questioned something about the woman, not to put her down, but to create emotional depth. He believed that when a woman feels a man can see sides of her that others ignore, she starts linking him to her own sense of identity. It was not an argument, it was controlled provocation. A sentence like, "You seem strong, but your eyes reveal something else," had the power to open emotional space for more intimate and vulnerable conversations. The experiment showed that when men used this type of soft conflict, women moved closer emotionally, trying to explain themselves, open up, justify themselves. They wanted to be understood. And when they felt the man was the only one capable of understanding them, a dependent connection was created. Machiavelli wrote, "A woman gives her heart to the one who understands her contradictions, not because he understands her, but because she believes he understands her." The difference was subtle, but the manipulation was deep. The manuscript then moved forward into induced emptiness. This was Machiavelli's favorite technique, and the most dangerous one. He instructed that after an emotionally intense moment, the man should pull back gently, almost without being noticed. It was not about disappearing, but about reducing intensity. The woman, accustomed to the depth of that moment, immediately felt the emotional absence and tried to fill it. In the reports Machiavelli collected, many women admitted they thought about the men precisely when the men pulled away slightly. He concluded, "No one misses someone who is always there. We only miss those who give us something rare and then disappear for a moment." This strategy deepened the sense of mystery, strengthened the man's emotional value, and most importantly, placed the woman in a state of constant expectation. And when a woman lives in expectation, everything the man does, even the simplest thing, felt bigger, more meaningful, more memorable. At the end of this section, Machiavelli stated that all of this was not seduction, but emotional conditioning. He said, "A conditioned heart confuses dependence with love." And up to that point, the experiment was moving exactly in that direction. The fourth part of the manuscript revealed what Machiavelli called the point of no return. It was the stage where the woman began to feel emotionally attached to the man without fully understanding how it had happened. Machiavelli said this moment was subtle, almost invisible, but unmistakable to those who knew how to observe. He described it like this: "The point of no return appears when the woman thinks about the man before sleeping and, upon waking up, cannot avoid thinking of him. It is not love, it is psychological intrusion." To reach this state, Machiavelli introduced the technique of calculated confession. He said that for a man to enter a woman's thoughts, he needed to reveal something that seemed intimate, but in reality served only as a way to open her emotions. The confession could not be too deep, and it could not be too trivial. It had to feel real enough for her to believe she was receiving a part of the man that no one else received. In the experiment, the men shared small strategic vulnerabilities, such as an old fear, an uncomfortable childhood memory, or an unresolved ambition. Nothing that truly risked their ego, but enough to activate the female instinct to care. And when the woman activated this instinct, when she felt she had access to a hidden part of him, something changed inside her. She began to feel special, chosen, needed. Machiavelli called this emotional capture through empathy. According to him, there is no stronger force a woman can feel than believing her affection has the power to heal something inside a man, even when that something was invented or carefully exaggerated for this purpose. In the reports from the women in the experiment, many of them said almost identical things. He seemed so strong on the outside, but so human on the inside. I wanted to stay close to understand him better. That was exactly what Machiavelli wanted to hear. The feeling of duality that transformed simple attraction into psychological fascination. From that point on, the woman was no longer just interested in the man, she was invested. The calculated confession, however, did not work on its own. Machiavelli combined this method with another crucial element: selective protection. Here, the man showed a very specific type of care that made the woman believe he saw her deeply and was attentive to her vulnerabilities. He did not say, "I will protect you." but made small gestures that suggested it without saying it. A look that noticed her discomfort before she spoke. A simple sentence that broke an insecurity. A light intervention during an awkward moment. The care felt instinctive, almost naturally intimate, and that was exactly why it was so powerful. Machiavelli wrote, "Selective protection makes a woman desire reciprocity. She feels she must give something back. And giving back, in this case, meant offering more emotional openness, more trust, more psychological surrender. Contrary to what many believe, it was not the man who gave himself first to win the woman. It was the woman who, feeling protected, began to reveal deeper emotions in the hope of strengthening that connection. And the more she revealed, the more vulnerable she became. Machiavelli observed that when a woman opens herself too much, she creates an involuntary desire for the man to stay close, not because he demanded it, but because she had already given a part of herself. The next technique described in the manuscript was even darker, inverted mirroring. Until then, the man reflected certain qualities that strengthened the connection. But at this stage, Machiavelli taught him to reflect some of her pains and insecurities, not to hurt her, but to make her feel understood in an almost hypnotic way. Inverted mirroring consisted of recognizing, with elegance and precision, vulnerabilities that she herself did not admit to anyone. It did not have to be something big. It was enough to notice small hesitations, hidden fears, silences that lasted too long, smiles that hid tension. And then suggest this with carefully chosen phrases. "You always try to look strong, but I know there are things that tire you more than you admit." Or, "You take care of everyone, but no one really takes care of you, right?" For many women, this kind of emotional perception was irresistible. In the dialogues analyzed by Machiavelli, several women confessed they had never felt so truly seen. He concluded, "A woman gives herself to the man who sees parts of her that even she avoids looking at." This created a dangerous connection, almost spiritual, that tied the woman to the man before she could even notice. It was not passion, it was emotional dependence disguised as intimacy. After this process, Machiavelli introduced the most critical technique, programmed silence. When the man realized the woman was emotionally involved, he gradually reduced the flow of attention, not as punishment, but as strategy. For Machiavelli, silence was the most powerful emotional stimulus. He said that when a woman faces sudden emptiness after deep experiences, she begins to fill that emptiness with interpretations, fantasies, and expectations. It is in silence, he wrote, that she creates the idealized version of the man. Because of this, the man did not need to do anything. It was enough for him not to appear for a while for her to start wondering what he was thinking, whether something had changed, or if she had done something wrong. This questioning created insecurity, but a soft, controlled insecurity. And this was the type of emotion Machiavelli considered most effective. He noted that when a woman tries to restore her emotional balance, she automatically wants to re-establish contact. And when contact finally happened, she reacted with more surrender, more intensity, and more attachment. The man then became a kind of emotional safe harbor, even though he himself was the one who created her need for that harbor. At the end of this part, Machiavelli concluded that seduction is not about making a woman like you, but about making her feel she needs you to maintain the emotional balance that you yourself disrupted. A cruel logic, but incredibly effective, and the foundation of the second half of the experiment. The fifth part of the manuscript began with a sentence that many historians consider one of the coldest and most precise Machiavelli ever wrote. "When a woman believes she chose the man, the game is won. When she believes she is being conquered, the game is lost." This was the core of the next phase of the experiment, directed self-illusion. Machiavelli discovered that the deepest seduction is born when the woman creates, on her own, the story that explains why that man is different from the others. The seducer's role was not to convince her of anything, but simply to provide fragments, loose pieces of an emotional puzzle. The woman herself completed the picture, and by completing it, became too emotionally invested to step back. The first technique of this phase was the interpretive frame. Here, the man never defined himself completely. He spoke little about himself, but allowed small, ambiguous pieces of information to slip out. A rare skill, an old loss, a mysterious ambition, a personality trait that seemed contradictory. As the woman tried to understand these disconnected pieces, she created an image far richer and more idealized than the man could ever build on his own. Machiavelli wrote, "The female mind completes what the man's silence suggests." In the accounts of the women studied, this was clear. He seemed to have an entire world inside him. Or, I wanted to know everything, but he never said everything. That gap, that empty space between what he showed and what he hid, was exactly what fed the fascination. The second technique was engineered coincidence. The men were taught to create moments that appeared accidental but were carefully designed for emotional impact. A song mentioned casually weeks earlier would randomly play when they were together. A childhood memory near water would later be echoed by an invitation to a lakeside place without explanation. To the women, these moments felt like destiny. Machiavelli rejected that word entirely. There is no destiny, only emotional engineering. The third technique was the indirect approach. A woman, he observed, does not fall for presence alone, but for the feeling of being understood. Instead of speaking directly about relationships, the men spoke about values, ideals, and the kind of people they admired. The woman, listening, recognized herself in those descriptions. By identifying with his ideals, she experienced what Machiavelli called an amplified reflection of her own ego. Next came the emotional hinge, small, nearly invisible shifts in emotional response. Slight disappointment followed by understanding. A subtle pause, then warmth. These micro-adjustments caused the woman to recalibrate her behavior unconsciously, not because she was asked to, but because she wanted harmony restored. Machiavelli called this effective self-correction. Then came guided doubt. Not doubt about the man, but doubt about her impact on him. A pause where a sentence should have ended, a tone that hinted at something unresolved. This created gentle emotional tension, an unfinished story, and nothing binds the heart more tightly than something that feels perpetually incomplete. From this, Machiavelli concluded that seduction is not linear, but spiral-shaped. Each turn brings the woman closer to the center while she believes she is choosing the path herself. Late in this phase came emotional seeding, a sentence released after long cycles of tension and closeness. "Sometimes I think you see parts of me no one else does." The woman received it as revelation. Machiavelli saw it as fuel. "A woman does not desire the man," he wrote. "She desires the story she can live with him." Structural seduction. The sixth phase marked a shift from subtle influence to structural attachment. Here, the woman did not simply feel differently, she reorganized her emotional life around the man. "A woman does not attach herself to the man who desires her," Machiavelli wrote. "She attaches herself to the man who shifts the internal axis of her decisions." The first method was the fixed emotional anchor. Moments of intense connection, deep conversation, heavy silence, a look that pierced defenses, were created and then ended abruptly. When similar emotions arose later in her life, her mind returned to the man who first awakened them. Whoever awakens a new emotion becomes the owner of the memory that contains it. Next came alternating immersion, presence, then distance, depth, then priority elsewhere. Not coldness, contrast. The woman began to seek access to the man's more intimate side, activating an emotional instinct of pursuit. "I wanted to know which version of him was real," many women reported. That constant search was the design. Then followed the inversion of emotional focus. Instead of seeking her approval, the man offered subtle observations, never accusations, that made her self-aware. "You're strong, but also very guarded." These phrases invited authenticity, and in trying to be authentic, she exposed herself emotionally. Exposure became investment. Finally came dependence through contrast. Gentle, then firm, close, then distant. Predictable enough to feel safe, complex enough to remain a mystery. The woman did not attach to consistency, but to variation held within control. "He was unpredictable in a good way," they said. Machiavelli translated that simply. Wanting to understand someone is already a form of captivity. The illusion of shared growth. The fifth technique of this phase was the most strategic of all, the illusion of shared growth. Here, the man made the woman feel she was evolving alongside him, not through declarations, but through carefully guided introspection. He asked questions that turned her inward. What do you really want from life? Why do you sabotage yourself in these moments? Have you noticed how much you're changing? These questions reshaped her self-perception, and because they emerged in his presence, she unconsciously associated her growth with him. Machiavelli wrote, "Whoever becomes the mirror of her growth becomes indispensable." Indispensability was the emotional status required to enter the final phase. The point of irreversibility appeared when the woman began to justify the man internally. His absences became depth, his flaws became wounds, his inconsistencies became proof of uniqueness. She was no longer defending the man. She was defending the story she had created with him. From seduction to attachment. The seventh part of the manuscript marked a tonal shift. Here we no longer study the woman, Machiavelli wrote. We study the human heart when it desires what it cannot control. He defined 3 levels of seduction: the superficial, the emotional, and the existential. The experiment had reached the 3rd. Orbiting presence. At this stage, physical presence was no longer necessary. The woman had already built an inner universe around the man. He appeared only at precise emotional moments, when she was vulnerable, reflective, or elevated. Never by accident, always as if by accident. This produced the sensation of spiritual alignment. When a woman believes you appear at the right moments, Machiavelli wrote, she begins to believe you belong to her destiny. Nourished frustration. The man offered intimacy, then left something unresolved, a thought unfinished, a conversation interrupted at its peak. This created what Machiavelli called the infinite curve, an emotional pursuit that promised depth but never fully delivered it. The women reported the same feeling. There was always more to him, something just beyond reach. That feeling was the prison. Directed vulnerability. The man revealed controlled weaknesses, not to evoke pity, but to create complicity. These were burdens that seemed too heavy for anyone else to understand. When a woman believes she alone sustains a man emotionally, she forms an obligation to remain. A woman does not abandon what she believes only she sustains. Intermittent warmth. Closeness. One day. Calm distance the next. Not chaos, rhythm. The woman began to invest emotionally to regain his warmer side. Hope took root. When the best of you is rare, Machiavelli wrote, she becomes the gardener of her own hope. Mirrored connection. The man anticipated her thoughts, completed her sentences, reflected her emotions. The illusion of perfect synchronization emerged. The brain interprets synchronized emotional rhythm as inevitability. Internal integration. At this stage, the man no longer needed to act. He lived inside her. She imagined his reactions, remembered his words, measured decisions against his presence. When her inner voice begins to sound like his, Machiavelli wrote, the process is complete. Progressive justification. Every inconsistency was reinterpreted, every flaw reframed. The woman no longer loved the man, she loved the interpretation she built to protect him. That interpretation became armor, attachment became nearly unbreakable. The final architecture, loyalty. The last phase abandoned subtlety entirely. A woman in love seeks the man, a woman involved waits for him. But the loyal woman builds her world around him. Sense of inevitability. The man framed the connection as something that always returned, always intensified. Not complements, narrative structures. When something feels inevitable, it stops being questioned. Rare validation. Approval became scarce but powerful. A look, a sentence, a moment. The rarer the validation, the more it was sought. Emotional alliance. The man shared goals, inner struggles, missions, not promises. The woman began to see herself as part of his purpose. A woman is loyal not to the man, Machiavelli wrote, but to the man who represents what she wants to become. Controlled emotional dissonance. Moments of depth were paired with unresolved tension. Silence, distance, hidden weight. The woman assumed the role of emotional guardian. I felt like he needed me. Devotion replaced desire. Symbolic solidification. Shared phrases, songs, places, rituals, symbols replaced reality, and symbols do not disappear. Structured absence. Finally, the man withdrew, not cruelly, but gently. Space was left for memory, fantasy, and projection to grow. It is not the man who conquers the woman, Machiavelli wrote, it is his absence that makes her heart complete him. When he returned, she received not a man, but the ideal Eshech,